Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you've spent most of your life looking at yourself through other people's eyes. You comb your hair not for yourself, but for the gaze of someone passing by. You speak not with your voice, but with a voice you've trained to be accepted, to be liked, to be applauded. And in all of this mirroring, you've forgotten to look into your own eyes, not in the reflection of someone else's admiration, but through the deep and silent space that is truly your own. See, the tragedy of modern existence isn't that people don't know who they are. It's that they never bothered to find out because they were too busy acting as if the audience came before the performer. But what if you flipped that? What if the audience didn't matter until you matter to yourself? What if you moved through the world, not seeking reflection, but radiating your own light, your own being, unapologetically and without reference? When we say act as if, we're often told to pretend, to put on the mask of confidence, the cloak of certainty. But this is not that kind of pretending. It's not a mask, it's a mirror. A mirror you hold up, not to see who others think you are, but to see who you've always been underneath the layers of performance. Act as if you see yourself first, not because others don't matter, but because they only matter when you are already standing firmly in your own sight. It's a strange paradox, isn't it? You have to step back to see yourself, not as a character playing out a role, but as the source of the story itself. Most people live like echoes, bouncing off the expectations of family, culture, society, never realizing they were the original sound. You don't need permission to be you. You don't need validation to walk in your own direction. You only need the courage to see yourself without distortion, without flinching. Because when you see yourself first, everything else becomes clearer. The anxiety of fitting in dissolves. The burden of comparison vanishes. There is no competition when you are living in alignment with your own essence. Acting as if you see yourself first means you walk into a room not wondering who is watching you, but wondering how fully you can show up as the being you were born to be. And most people think transformation comes from effort, from grinding, from doing. But the most profound change happens the moment you turn your gaze inward. The second you realize you're not the sum of others' opinions, but the root of your own awareness. You don't become powerful by being seen. You become powerful by seeing. By seeing and yourself, your worth, your wholeness. When you begin to see yourself always and without the world begins to shift. People who never saw you suddenly notice. Not because you've changed to fit their lens, but because you've turned on your own light. And light does not ask for attention. It simply is, and in its being, it reveals everything. So instead of acting for approval, act from recognition. Instead of seeking to be seen, begin by truly seeing yourself, not the self shaped by insecurity, not the self shaped by expectation, but the one that exists before the world taught you who to be. You are not an opinion to be judged, you are a presence to be experienced. And that experience begins the moment you act. Not as if you matter to them, but as if you matter to you. Because once you do, you'll stop chasing things that don't belong to you. You'll stop dimming yourself to fit into places too small for your spirit. You'll stop apologizing for taking up space in a world that desperately needs the fullness of your being. You'll begin to move through life not as a question waiting for an answer, but as an answer walking confidently through the noise. And all of this quiet revolution of being, begins the moment you act as if you see yourself first. Most people spend their lives trying to be what others expect. They wear masks crafted by culture, stitched together by the judgments of family, teachers, peers, and strangers. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they drift further away from themselves and deeper into a performance. You walk into a room and immediately scan the space, not to feel it, but to measure how you should act in it. You monitor your posture, your smile, your tone, not because it feels natural, but because it feels safe. Approval becomes the currency of your existence. And somewhere in the pursuit of being liked, loved, or at least accepted, you abandon the one person whose opinion matters most, your own. This is the quiet tragedy. You exist, yet remain unseen by the one person who should never overlook you. Acting as if you see yourself first is not about arrogance or selfishness. It is a profound act of reclaiming. Reclaiming your awareness, reclaiming your perception, reclaiming the original encounter with your own presence. It's about no longer outsourcing your identity to the gaze of others. It's about realizing that you are not here to impress the world. You are here to express the truth of your own existence. And that truth can only be accessed when you stop playing the part written for you and begin to improvise from the depths of your own soul. There's a deep and mysterious power in being seen, not by others, but by yourself. To see yourself not as a list of accomplishments, titles, or likes on a screen, but as the living pulse of awareness, flowing through this body, this mind, this moment. When you stop performing, even for a moment, and sit quietly with yourself, you will hear something astonishing. Not the one shaped by etiquette or survival, the one that speaks in silence, the one that knows who you are without needing to prove it. But most are afraid to stop performing because performance is familiar. It feels like safety. It feels like control. There is a terrifying vulnerability in being authentic. What if who you really are isn't good enough? What if people don't approve of the real you? And so you carry on, polished and rehearsed, hoping that if you play your part well enough, maybe, just maybe, you'll finally be accepted. But acceptance, won by acting, is never real. It's conditional, it's temporary, it's hollow, and it leaves you feeling more alone than ever because deep down, you know, they didn't love you. They loved your mask. So the invitation here is simple but radical. Stop looking out and start looking in. Begin to live from the inside out, not the outside in. Practice the art of being yourself in a world that profits from your self-doubt. Don't wait for the mirror of other people's reactions to tell you who you are. Don't ask, what do they think of me? Ask instead, what do I know of myself? Sit with that question, not as an idea, but as a meditation. Let it penetrate the surface layers of your mind. Let it undo you. Break you open and rearrange the furniture of your identity. Because when you start to act as if you see yourself first, something remarkable happens. You stop needing the applause. You stop chasing the nods and the claps and the validation. You become rooted in your own awareness, and that awareness becomes enough. You find peace in your presence. You find power in your perception. You stop treating yourself as a stranger and begin to meet yourself as an intimate. The gaze that once searched for acceptance outward turns inward and finds what it was always longing for. Recognition, not from others, but from the self. This is not a call to isolation, but to authenticity. When you live from your center, your relationships deepen, not disappear. You no longer relate to others through the fog of pretense. You meet them eye to eye, soul to soul, and you give them permission to do the same. Because when you act as if you see yourself first, you light a torch in the dark. A silent example to those still trapped in the performance, still waiting to be told who they are. You don't need to become someone else to be worthy. You don't need to shrink, contort, or polish yourself into perfection. Worth is not something you earn by being agreeable. It is something you discover by being real. And that discovery begins the moment you stop living for others' eyes and begin living from your own sight. You are not a reaction. You are not the echo of someone else's voice, but for most of your life you've been taught to live as if you are. You adjust your energy to the temperature of the room. You withhold your laughter if it seems too loud. You suppress your tears if they feel like an inconvenience. And slowly, you become the echo instead of the origin. An echo has no direction of its own. It merely bounces, repeating what was already said, but you were never meant to be an echo. You were meant to be the sound itself, not an effect, but a cause. Not a copy, but a source. And there lies the truth. You are the original, not the reflection. So why then do we settle for living as reflections? Why do we become mirrors for the expectations, judgments, and projections of others? Because it feels safer. Because being the echo is easier than risking rejection for being the voice. But what we forget is that safety in this form comes at the cost of self. You end up wearing masks so well for so long that even you forget who you were underneath. You wake up one day and realize that your desires are not yours, your goals are borrowed, and your image is built not on truth, but on survival. But what if you reversed that? What if, instead of trying to reflect the world, you let the world reflect you? What if you stopped waiting for the external to give you direction and instead moved from the internal? To be the original sound means you don't ask, who should I be? But rather, what is already true within me? That shift from echo to origin is not an act of rebellion. It's an act of remembering. Remembering that before the world told you how to walk, how to talk, how to be, reclaim that original self, you must first go silent. Not the silence of suppression, but the silence of clarity. The kind of silence that listens not to others, but to the quiet pulse beneath your thoughts. In that silence, the echo fades, and the original voice begins to rise. Not loud, but true. It doesn't shout to be heard. It doesn't demand attention. It simply is. And that isness carries a presence that no imitation can match. It's the same presence that exists in a mountain, unmoved by wind, or in the ocean that doesn't seek applause for its waves. It just exists, And in its existence, it commands respect, not by force, but by being what it is without apology. There is nothing more magnetic than someone who walks in the world as their own original. They don't try to fit in, and yet they belong everywhere. They don't try to be seen, and yet they are unforgettable. Why? Because they are not echoes. They are not acting from programming, from fear, from the desperate need to be accepted. They are rooted in their own source, and everything they do flows from that grounding. But don't mistake originality for uniqueness in the sense of performance. It's not about being quirky or different for the sake of it. It's about being real, being honest, being aligned with yourself so deeply that everything you do becomes an expression of your being. You don't have to shout, "This is me," when you're walking in authenticity. People will feel it in your silence. They will notice it in your presence. And the ones who truly see you will be drawn not to your performance, but to your essence. When you act as if you are the original, you start to make decisions that reflect your own rhythm. You don't rush because everyone else is running. You don't doubt yourself because others are unsure. You move from a place of inner knowing that doesn't need confirmation. That knowing is not loud. It doesn't come with fanfare, but it is unshakable, like a tree rooted deep in the earth, bending to the wind but never uprooted by it. To live as the original is to stop asking for permission to be what you already are. You don't wait for applause. You don't need the nod of approval. You simply express. You speak the words that are true for you. You walk the path that makes sense to your spirit. And sometimes that means walking alone. Sometimes that means being misunderstood. But the solitude of authenticity is more peaceful than the crowdedness of conformity, because in that solitude you meet yourself. And that meeting is the beginning of everything. When you stop being the echo, you begin to create. Not just art or ideas, but a life that feels like it belongs to you. A life not scripted by external agendas, but authored by the quiet authority within. You begin to recognize that the echo only exists because the original spoke first. So why not be the first voice? Why not be the one who dares to speak truth when others repeat lies? Why not be the one who steps forward not because it's popular, but because it's real? And yes, the world might resist. It always resists the original because the original threatens the illusion. But even in resistance, there is liberation. Because once you've tasted what it means to live as yourself, you can never fully go back to being the echo. You may waver, you may forget, but something in you remembers. Something in you knows. And that knowing will call you home again and again until you stop bouncing off of others and start vibrating with your own frequency. There's a deep stillness in living this way, not a stillness of inactivity, but of integrity. You act, but not for performance. You speak, but not for approval. You show up, but not to impress. You become the quiet storm, calm, centered, but powerful beyond words. And people will notice, not because you demand their gaze, but because you've stopped looking through their eyes to see yourself. You've returned to origin. And in that return, you become undeniable. There is a quiet strength in those who no longer depend on the gaze of others to define their worth. You can feel it when they walk into a room, not because they seek attention, but because they carry none of the weight of needing it. They are present, centered, awake. Their energy is not scattered by the opinions of strangers or shaken by criticism or praise. This kind of presence doesn't come from years of performance. It doesn't come from achieving more, proving more, or gathering more admiration. It comes from a place most people are afraid to look, a place within. To see yourself clearly is to reclaim a power that the world has taught you to give away. From the time you were a child, you were told, either directly or subtly, that you were to be seen through others. Approval became a substitute for peace. Recognition became the illusion of value. But approval is never stable. It changes with trends, with moods, with misunderstandings and projections. One day you are admired, the next day you are questioned. One moment you are the hero, the next the villain. And if your sense of identity rests in this unstable sea, you will always be at the mercy of its tides. But there is a deeper ocean within you, still, clear, and unmoved. It is not reactive. It is not desperate to be acknowledged. It simply is. And this isness is the birthplace of real power. Not power over others, but power within yourself. The kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself because it's not rooted in scarcity. It's rooted in clarity. And clarity is only possible when you stop seeking yourself in reflections and start standing still in the awareness of what already exists in you. To live from this place, you must begin to strip away everything that you've believed you had to be. The masks, the postures, the performances. They've served a purpose. Perhaps they kept you safe, helped you survive. But they are not who you are. They are strategies, not selves. And the longer you hold on to them, the harder it becomes to hear your own voice beneath the noise. But the moment you put them down, even for a breath, a silence opened, a window of perception, and through that window you begin to see not the version of yourself shaped by fear, but the one that existed before fear took hold. This is the self that does not flinch under judgment, the self that does not shrink in the face of rejection, the self that knows its own name without needing to hear it echoed back. And when you live from this center, you discover that peace was never something to be found. It was something to be remembered. It was always with you, waiting beneath the layers of effort and expectation. It's not easy. We are conditioned from childhood to associate our value with performance. Do well and be praised. Fit in and be accepted. Break the pattern and risk abandonment. But the deeper truth is that abandonment only occurs when you abandon yourself. The world's rejection hurts most when it echoes the rejection we've already inflicted inwardly. And so the antidote is not external validation, it's internal vision, the ability to see yourself without distortion, to recognize your own wholeness, your own sacredness, without needing anyone to confirm it. And here's where the shift happens. When you start to live from that inner recognition, your life changes in quiet, powerful ways. You stop chasing people who don't see you. You stop begging for seats at tables where your presence is tolerated but not treasured. You walk away from spaces that require you to dim your light just to make others comfortable. And you do it not out of bitterness, but from a deep understanding that you are no longer available to abandon yourself for the illusion of belonging. You begin to move differently, speak differently, not louder, not with more force, but with a steady, unshakable tone that says, I know who I am. And that knowing radiates. It changes how people experience you. Some may be drawn to it, others may be threatened by it, but none can ignore it. Because you are no longer projecting an image, you are embodying a truth. You are not asking to be seen, you are seeing, and that changes everything. The beauty of this path is that once you begin to see yourself, you also begin to see others more clearly, not through the lens of comparison or competition, but with compassion. You recognize the masks they wear because you've worn them too. You hear the insecurity in their voice because you've spoken from that place. And instead of reacting, you hold space. You become a mirror, not the kind that reflects society's standards, but the kind that invites others to see themselves. But all of it starts with a single choice, a choice to stop looking out and start looking in. A choice to trust your own vision over the blurred lens of external opinion. A choice to let go of the frantic need to be recognized and instead return to the quiet strength of self-recognition. Because once you see yourself clearly, you no longer walk into rooms wondering who will notice you. You walk in already knowing you belong. Not because someone told you so, but because you carry your place with you. And when you carry your place with you, the world begins to respond. Not because you chased it, but because you finally stopped chasing anything and became rooted in the only place that ever mattered. Comparison is a silent thief. It doesn't crash into your life loudly, like tragedy or heartbreak. It slips in quietly through glances, through scrolling, through overheard conversations. It whispers into your mind when you're not paying attention, telling you that you're behind, that you're not enough, that someone else is doing it better, faster, more beautifully than you. And before you even realize what's happening, you begin to shrink. You stop trusting your own path because you're too busy measuring its worth against someone else's. But when you begin to live from within, when you truly act as if you see yourself first, that habit of comparison starts to dissolve. It doesn't disappear in an instant, but it begins to lose its grip, because you're no longer looking outward to find your place. You're rooted in your own ground. Living authentically means returning to your own rhythm. Every person on this earth has their own pace, their own timing, their own season. But we live in a world that teaches synchronization, not individuality. You're told there's one standard for beauty, one timeline for success, one definition of happiness. And if you're not fitting into that mold, you start to question yourself. You start to feel behind, broken, or less than. But the moment you realize that you were never meant to be part of a herd, the moment you begin to truly see yourself, you stop comparing and start cultivating. You tend to your own life like a garden, not looking over the fence to see how green someone else's grass is, but watering your own soil with patience, love, and presence. It is in that act of tending to your own being that comparison loses its power, because comparison thrives on distance. It thrives on disconnect. It needs you to look away from yourself. But when you are fully engaged with your own path, you simply don't have the energy to look elsewhere. You're too absorbed in becoming. You're too fascinated by the unfolding of your own life. And it's not that you stop noticing others. It's that you no longer use them as a measuring stick. You can celebrate them without questioning yourself. You can witness their light without doubting your own. You begin to see life not as a race, but as a shared experience, where each person's journey is their own sacred unfolding. Competition, too, begins to lose its sting. Because when you live from the center of your being, you realize that no one else can take your place. There is no race, there is no winner. There is only alignment. Either you are in it or you are not. When you are aligned with yourself, the idea of competing becomes absurd. How can you compete with someone who is on an entirely different path? Their success doesn't threaten yours. Their progress doesn't diminish your growth. You begin to understand that you are not late, you are not lost, you are not lacking, you are simply living, moment by moment, breath by breath, unfolding in the time that is right for you. There is a profound kind of freedom that comes with this shift. You stop rushing, you stop forcing, you stop chasing what is not meant for you. And in that stillness, something beautiful begins to grow. Your own voice, your own ideas, your own way of moving through the world. You are no longer shaped by trends or approval. You are shaped by truth, your truth. And that truth is not louder than others. It is just clearer. It is steady. It is consistent. It doesn't need to shout because it doesn't need to convince anyone. But to live this way, you must unlearn a great deal. You must unlearn the need to compare. You must unlearn the story that says your worth is dependent on outperforming others. You must unlearn the belief that you are only valuable when you are winning, achieving, excelling. These beliefs were not born in you, they were planted. And you have the power to uproot them, not with force, but with awareness. Every time you catch yourself comparing, pause. Every time you feel the tension of competition rising in your chest, breathe. And remind yourself, I am not here to compete. I am here to be. That kind of being is not passive. It is vibrant. It is alive. It takes courage to stand in your own energy when the world tries to pull you into comparison. It takes strength to walk your own path without needing to explain it. But in doing so, you reclaim your life. You take back your attention. You redirect your energy from watching others to cultivating yourself. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to glow differently. Not because you're trying to shine brighter than others, but because you finally stopped dimming your light. This is the paradox. When you stop trying to compete, you begin to stand out. Not in an aggressive way, but in an authentic way. People feel it. They sense the integrity in your presence. They're drawn to it, even if they can't articulate why. It's because they are witnessing something rare. Imagine for a moment that the world around you is not something separate from your mind, but a mirror of it. That what you call reality is in fact a dance between your consciousness and the universe. And in this dance, every thought, every emotion, every desire you carry is not just some private echo bouncing inside your skull, but a signal, a vibration, resonating with the very fabric of existence. Now consider the notion of desire, not as longing, not as lack, but as a declaration of what already is. You see, most people live as if their dreams are distant, hanging somewhere in the future like fruit on a branch just out of reach. They speak in terms of, I hope, or someday, or if only. And in doing so, they inadvertently reinforce the illusion that they are separate from what they seek. But what if I told you that the very act of wanting is a clue that what you want is already here, already present, waiting. To act as if your desire is already here is not to pretend or to play make-believe. It is to move into alignment with the rhythm of reality. It is to stop asking the world for permission to feel whole, and to start behaving as though the fullness of life already pulses through you. Because it does. When you act as if your desire is here, you are not faking anything. You are remembering. You are shedding the trance of scarcity, the myth that fulfillment lies somewhere out there. And instead, you are awakening to the truth that everything you could ever need is coded within the present moment, like a melody waiting for you to hum its tune. This is not about delusion. It's about clarity. It's about realizing that your circumstances are not the prison. They are the clay. Your perception molds them, gives them meaning, breathes them into shape. If you walk through life believing that you are incomplete without the thing you seek, then you cast yourself into the role of the beggar. But if you walk with the posture of one who already possesses what they desire, you become the artist, the creator, the master of your experience. You do not attract what you chase. You attract what you are. And what you are is constantly revealed through how you behave. So the way you carry yourself, the words you speak, the emotions you entertain, all of these are signals to the world about who you believe yourself to be. You must begin to speak from the victory, not toward it. Dress in alignment with the reality you want, not the one you resent. Sit, breathe, move, and love as one who already has what they once thought they lacked. This is the paradox, isn't it? That by needing nothing, you gain everything. By no longer chasing, you draw it in. By no longer waiting, you realize you were never lacking. Because in truth, there is no such thing as the future, there is only now. Rippling outward in infinite directions, taking on the form you most believe in. To act as if your desire is already here is to step out of time. It is to meet the eternal in this very breath. It is to laugh at the old story that said you had to strive and struggle and suffer to earn your worth. You were worthy the moment you were born. And you are still worthy now. So go on. Step into the feeling. Not tomorrow. Now. Walk with the joy as if the love has arrived. Breathe with the peace as if the healing is complete. Speak with the confidence as if the doors are already open, because they are. Desire is often misunderstood. Most people see it as a sign of something missing. They believe that to desire is to acknowledge absence, to long for something they do not yet have. But that interpretation creates a distortion in how we live and how we interact with the world. The moment we see desire as a sign of lack, we step into the illusion that life is incomplete, that we are incomplete, and that what we long for is separate from us, locked away behind time or effort or permission. And yet, the truth is far more mysterious and liberating. What if desire is not a signal of what's missing, but of what's already present? What if it's the soul's way of showing you that something is already part of your path, already intertwined with your being, simply waiting for you to recognize it, not attain it? Desire arises because somewhere deep within you, you've already tasted the feeling of having, even if only for a brief flicker, a dream or a thought. There was a resonance, a frequency that matched something real. That flicker is not fantasy. That moment of emotional clarity, that inner knowing, is not a trick your mind is playing. It is a glimpse of what already exists in the unseen. You are not inventing your desire out of nowhere. You are remembering, you are awakening to a dimension of yourself that has always been there. This is why certain desires feel sacred, almost haunting. They return again and again, whispering to you in the quiet moments, in the solitude, in the spaces between distractions. They echo not because you are missing them, but because they are calling you to see them as already yours. When you desire to be free, to be loved, to live with purpose, those feelings don't emerge from lack. They emerge from truth. They're not reminders of what you don't have. They're reminders of who you really are. Think of a seed buried in the soil. From the outside, it may look like nothing is happening, but within, life is unfolding. The roots are forming. The potential is already in motion. The seed doesn't hope to become a tree. It already is a tree, just in another form. Its desire to grow is not because it is lacking in life, but because it is full of it. So full that it must express it outward. In the same way, your desire is the sprouting of something already alive within you. You are not chasing it. You are becoming aware of it. But the moment you label your desire as something separate, something out there in a distant future, you begin to disconnect from its power. You make it conditional. You turn it into a goal that you might achieve, rather than a truth that is unfolding. And so you enter a cycle of striving, hoping, delaying. You say, I'll feel happy when, or I'll be at peace once, and unknowingly push your own fulfillment further into the future, never to be reached. This is the trap. This is the sleep so many never wake from. To live wisely is to flip this perspective. It is to realize that desire is the evidence of a deeper connection. It is not a signal of distance, but a signpost of alignment. When you feel drawn to something, a life, a relationship, a calling, it is not because it is missing, but because it is near. It is already within the orbit of your being. You are being asked not to chase, but to remember. Not to pursue, but to receive. But this is where most people go wrong. They believe they must do something grand, prove their worth, sacrifice, or struggle before they are allowed to feel fulfilled. They think desire is something they must earn the right to have. But the reality is, desire is an invitation, not a negotiation. It is not saying, look, this is already yours in essence. Now align with it in form. So how do you align? You act as if. You embody the reality inwardly before it ever shows up outwardly. You don't wait for the evidence. You become the evidence. You shift your inner state, not because the outer world has changed, but because your inner world already knows the truth. You act from the desire, not toward it. Because once you realize the desire is already here, in some form, spiritually, energetically, emotionally, you begin to live from a place of wholeness, not lack. And when you live from that place, the outer world has no choice but to reflect it. It is not magic, though it may feel magical. It is resonance, harmony, the natural law of reflection. The same way your face is reflected in the mirror, not by demand, but by position. You stand in front of the mirror, and it shows you what you are. Life is the same. It reflects what you are being. If you carry the belief that your desire is far away, the mirror of life shows you distance. If you carry the feeling that it is already here, the mirror confirms it. So instead of asking, how do I get what I want, begin asking, how would I think, feel, speak, and move if I already had it? And then live that way, not to trick the universe, but to remember your power. To close the gap between wanting and being. Because the truth is, there was never a gap to begin with. The gap was in your perception, and once that gap dissolves, you begin to realize that all this time, you weren't waiting for your desire to come to you. It was waiting for you to come back to yourself. The way we perceive reality is not a passive act. It is not something that merely happens to us. It is a creative participation, a shaping of the world through the lens of our own consciousness. Most people live with the assumption that reality is fixed, external, separate from the inner world of their thoughts and emotions. They believe that events unfold independently of their perception, that life is something they must react to, cope with, but that is only one side of the story, and it is incomplete. The other side, the quieter truth, is that life does not simply happen to us. It responds to us. It mirrors our inner state, reflects our beliefs, and dances in harmony with the frequency we hold within. This is not a metaphorical idea. It is a deeply experiential one. If you walk into a room expecting hostility, your body tenses, your tone sharpens, your defenses rise, and others react accordingly. If you approach with openness, ease, and confidence, the energy shifts. It is subtle, yes, but real. In every moment, your inner posture sends ripples outward, and those ripples return in kind. So when it comes to desire, when it comes to the life you long for, the reality you yearn to live, it is not simply a matter of external effort. It is more profoundly a matter of internal alignment. The world around you becomes a canvas, and your consciousness the brush. What you believe, how you feel, what you expect, all of these are the colors with which you paint your experience. And the brush strokes are your behavior, your words, your attention. Life is not an objective photograph taken from the outside. It is a living painting created from the inside out. This is why two people can live the same moment and experience completely different realities. One sees opportunity, the other sees danger. One sees beauty, the other sees decay. And neither is wrong. Each is responding to the world not as it is, but as they are. Reality is filtered through the self and then returned back to the self. And so the world becomes a loop, a feedback system, echoing the truths we hold, the fears we nurture, the desires we cherish, and the doubts we feed. When you begin to grasp this, something shifts. You stop blaming the world for being unkind or unfair. You stop waiting for life to prove itself before you allow yourself to feel joy or peace or confidence. You begin instead to recognize that the external mirrors the internal. If you walk around believing that you are not enough, that life is against you, that your desires are too big or too distant, then the world will reinforce that belief, not because it is cruel, but because it is obedient. It listens to your signal and it plays it back. But if you begin to shift the frequency, not with force, But with awareness, you start to see change. If you carry yourself as someone who already holds what they desire, who already feels grateful, who already trusts the unfolding, then the world begins to match that tone. People treat you differently, opportunities reveal themselves, the energy of your surroundings begins to bend toward your belief, not as an act of magic, but as a response to resonance. This is not about pretending. It is not about putting on a mask or faking emotions. That only creates friction. This is about truly understanding that your perception is the gateway through which life flows. That by changing your perspective, you are not denying reality. You are shaping it. You are inviting a different rhythm, a different flavor, a different melody to play through your experience. You do not need to fix everything outside of you. You do not need to wait for the world to give you permission to feel whole. You need only to shift the lens through which you see. And that lens is crafted from your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotional tone. Begin to observe them, not judge them, not resist them, but simply observe. Ask yourself, what story am I telling about my life? What assumptions am I making about my worth, my future, my path? And are those assumptions serving me or trapping me? Because when you change the story, you change the scenery. When you change the emotional atmosphere within, the weather outside begins to follow. And this is not about controlling the world. It is about collaborating with it, flowing with it, co-creating it. It is about realizing that the walls you thought were solid are in fact responsive, that the path you thought was blocked may simply be waiting for you to believe it is open. So many spend their lives locked in patterns they don't understand, repeating cycles of disappointment, fear, scarcity. They don't realize that those cycles are reflections, not punishments. That the world is not mocking them, but mirroring them. That the change they seek is not waiting in some future moment. It is waiting in their present awareness. The shift is always within reach, but it begins inside. When you act from the belief that your desire is already here, you change your tone. You no longer beg life for crumbs. You no longer plead with the universe for mercy. You speak from fullness. You walk with clarity. You listen with peace. And that energy does not go unnoticed. It reverberates. It touches others. It alters the rhythm of your day, your relationships, your decisions. You don't have to force your desires into being. You only have to align yourself with them. You only have to become a clear signal, a resonant match for what you already feel called to. And the way you do that is by embodying it now. Not someday, now. You let your inner world become the sanctuary where your dreams already live. And from there, you move not to chase, but to receive. Not to demand, but to express. Not to wait, but to become. There is a curious paradox at the heart of life. The more desperately you chase something, the more it seems to slip away. Like trying to catch your own shadow. The harder you run toward it, the farther it retreats. This is especially true of desires. The more you yearn, plead, or strive for something from a place of lack, the more distant it appears. It's as if the universe senses your desperation, not your dream. But when you shift your energy, when you begin to embody the state of already having, already being, already living what you seek, the world bends differently around you. That is the strange and subtle magic of being. You do not attract what you pursue, you attract what you already are. This is not to say that dreams do not matter or that effort is meaningless. It is to say that the emotional foundation beneath your actions is far more powerful than the actions themselves. If you take steps towards something from the belief that you are not enough until you get it, then those steps carry with them the scent of incompleteness. Your very striving sends a message. I do not have. And so that becomes your lived experience. You might work hard, plan meticulously, pray earnestly, but if the core of your being still hums with lack, Slan, land, the angel. On the other hand, if you rest in the awareness that you are already whole, already connected to the essence of what you want, then your actions carry a different vibration. They become expressions of abundance, not cries for help. Your steps are not frantic, they are graceful. They are rooted. And because of that, the world responds. People feel your confidence before you speak. Opportunities arise not because you chase them, but because your energy invites. This is not a trick, it's alignment. People often misunderstand this and assume it means you should do nothing. But being what you seek is not about inaction. It is about inspired action. It is about moving from a place of inner truth rather than external desperation. When you embody peace, you act with peace. When you embody love, you speak with love. When you embody success, your decisions reflect confidence and clarity. You are no longer reacting to emptiness. You are expressing fullness. And that expression draws things to you with an ease that striving can never replicate. You have likely felt this, even if only briefly. Think of a time when you felt utterly confident, not because someone praised you, but because you were in alignment with yourself. In those moments, you didn't need to prove anything. You didn't need to convince or control. You simply were. And the world noticed. Things flowed. People listened. Doors opened. That is the state where manifestation becomes natural, not forced. It is the place where you become magnetic, not because of what you do, but because of who you are being. Most people live in reverse. They believe they must first have something in order to feel a certain way. When I get the job, I'll feel successful. When I meet the right person, I'll feel love. When I'm wealthy, I'll feel secure. But life does not operate on that timeline. It responds to inner signals, not outer conditions. If you wait for the external to change before you give yourself permission to feel differently, you trap yourself in an endless loop of postponement. The real shift begins when you flip the script and decide to feel now what you think you can only feel later. That choice, to feel, think, and act as though your desire is already yours, is not a lie. It is a deeper truth. It is an act of trust in the unseen, a surrender to the knowing that what is meant for you is already a part of your energetic field. The job, the relationship, the peace of mind, they are not separate from you. They are drawn toward the version of you that aligns with them. So the work is not to chase them down like a predator stalking its prey. The work is to become the version of yourself that no longer doubts their place in your life. This is where many falter. They try to force alignment through effort, through routine, through control. but force is always a sign of misalignment. When you are in harmony with your desire, action becomes fluid. You don't overthink, you don't agonize, you simply move, in rhythm with the current that is already carrying you. You know you're no longer chasing, you're allowing. And this shift is not something dramatic. Often it's as simple as a breath, a pause, a realization that you've been gripping too tightly. When you let go of needing the desire to prove your worth or fix your life, you return to the state that naturally attracts it. You become light, you become receptive. And in that openness, the very things you once chased now find their way to you, not because you begged for them, but because you became ready to receive them. You do not have to act strong to attract strength. You only need to stop identifying with weakness. You don't have to act lovable to attract love. You only need to stop telling the story that you are unworthy. When you change your identity, your outer world must follow, not because you forced it to, but because the world has no choice but to meet you where you are. That is the law. The internal state dictates the external reflection. The being comes before the having. So, pause. Ask yourself not what you want, but who you would be if it were already yours. Then be that now. Not in some abstract theoretical way, but in the most practical, grounded sense. Sit with that version of you. Walk like them. Think like them. Speak like them, not because you're pretending, but because you're unveiling. Because what you seek is not separate from who you are. It is encoded in your essence, waiting to be remembered, not earned. And in remembering, you align with what you were always meant to receive, not through pursuit, but through... There's something deeply mysterious about the present moment. It is so simple, so silent, so ordinary, that most people overlook it entirely. Their minds are constantly leaning forward, anticipating the next event, the next opportunity, the next fix. Their thoughts spin webs of what might happen or what could go wrong. The future becomes a kind of idol, a place where happiness, peace, and fulfillment are always promised but never delivered. The mind says, once I get there, I'll finally be okay. But there never arrives. The future is always just out of reach. What people don't realize is that what they long for isn't in some distant moment. They are looking for something that has always been available now. The present moment is not just a stepping stone to the future. It is the only place anything real ever happens. Every future you dream of, every desire you carry, every hope that fills your heart, all of it can only be met here, in this breath, in this space. The idea that something will change later, that peace will arrive tomorrow, or that joy will come when your circumstances shift, is an illusion born from the habit of delay. It's like looking at the horizon and trying to touch it. You never reach it because it was never meant to be reached. And so the tragedy is this: people postpone their aliveness. They delay their joy. They put their freedom on hold. All because they believe it's tied to something external, some condition, achievement, or permission from life. But the truth is that your wholeness is already here. It is buried beneath the noise, beneath the story, beneath the rush to arrive somewhere better. You don't need a future event to feel complete. You need only to come back to this moment, not as a task, not as a meditation exercise, but desire tricks the mind into believing it must strive, but the heart knows better. The heart understands that the feeling you think you're chasing is already available. because the only place it can ever be felt is now. You want love? Feel it now. Not from another, but from within. You want peace? Stop seeking and be still, because the act of seeking is what's disturbing your peace in the first place. You want abundance? Begin to sense the fullness of what already surrounds you. The air in your lungs, the beat of your heart, the warmth of sunlight. These are not trivial things. They are the foundation of life itself. The more you slow down and enter this moment, the more you begin to see that nothing is actually missing. The mind may protest. It may remind you of your goals, your problems, your past. But none of that is here. Not truly. What is real is what is present. And if you can learn to settle into this space without resistance, without grasping, you start to feel something remarkable, a quiet joy, a still confidence, a sense that you are already okay, already safe, already aligned. And from that space, you don't need to create a better future. You naturally walk into one because you are no longer driven by fear or lack. You are moved by clarity. This is why acting as if your desire is already fulfilled brings it into form, not through force, but through presence. When you feel as though what you want is already here, you stop creating the energy of distance. You no longer say, "It's over there," and "I'm stuck here." Instead, you say, "It's in me. I feel it. I live it." That subtle shift changes everything. You stop reinforcing separation and start radiating connection. You stop longing and start allowing. And in that allowance, life meets you. Not in the future, but right here. This is the paradox that confuses many. When you stop needing the future to be different, the future begins to transform. Not because you controlled it, but because you return to yourself. The present moment is the womb of all creation. It is where thoughts turn into energy, and energy turns into matter. When you align with peace now, when you align with love now, when you align with abundance now, you are planting seeds in the only soil that can grow them, the now. If you wait for the world to give you a reason to feel good, you become a prisoner of conditions. You make your inner state a slave to outer events. But if you decide to feel now what you believed only the future could give you, you reclaim your power. You stop waiting. You start living. You begin to realize that your experience is not a result of the world. It is a reflection of your inner climate, and the present moment is where that climate is felt, shaped, and projected. There is